Good morning, everybody. Well, I was about to say good morning, Ian, but it's not. What is it for you?
It is 7 o'clock at night after a very long day, so I'm doing pretty well, I think. I've had the energy drinks and the caffeine, so I'm all
Okay,
good.
I was about to say hopefully we caught you before you got into the beers, but maybe that comes in an hour or so.
Yeah.
All
Vodka,
right.
actually.
Well,
It's Polish stepfather, so I've been trained on the hard. Yeah.
good. So apart from just Ian and I having a chat, good morning and good afternoon, probably for our Kiwi friends, everybody. Thank you for joining us. If you've wandered into this webinar by mistake, you're here for the RAD Studio 13.1 launch event, I guess. The civilized one, not the one that happened in the middle of the night. The one for civilized people. So, as a basic rundown of what we've got on today, we're going to go through the actual launch event, have a look at some of the new features, talk about where the focus areas are, that sort of thing. At the end of after we've done all of that, we'll come back and have a Q&A session, Ian and myself. If you've got questions during the presentation, feel free to put them in the chat window. Some of them we'll answer on the go. Some of them we might hold and revisit in the Q&A session at the end if we think they might be questions that lots of people are interested in. Yeah, feel free to put them in the chat window while we go, and then come back and join us all at the end. So anything else you want to add, Ian, before we get this show on the road?
No, good morning, everybody, and good afternoon to the Kiwis. But apart from that, let's go for it.
All right. So yeah, let's kick this off.
Welcome to the launch of RAD Studio 13.1 Florence. Today your presenters are myself, Ian Barker from Developer Relations, Marco Cantu, RAD Studio PM, Nuno Castro, RAD Studio PM, and Maxim Menshikov, RAD Studio PM, and finally Ben Schwenk, Embarcadero, General Manager. Just before we start talking about 13.1, let's just do a very brief recap of RAD Studio 13.0 and some of the top new features that came with that. One of them was a new language feature in Delphi, the ternary if operator, simplifying some of those statements where you need to say this or this in one expression. It was very useful, very commonly asked for feature, and we included that in 13.0. We also, for C++ Builder users, implemented CLang or Clang 20 upgrade. That was very welcome and allows you to basically compile almost any C++ program now using C++ Builder 13.0. And we also completed the work on the 64-bit IDE for the Windows 64-bit platform. More on this a little bit later. We also, for C++ users, implemented some more work on Visual Assist and did some improvement on code tooling as well as some improvements on Visual Assist. We also introduced for the first time Smart Core AI Component Pack available via Getit, so that we could update it more frequently than we would do with the releases. VCL title bar styling and some new FMX controls to make your apps look even better. And finally, we did some work on Web Broker and Web Stencils, some extensions to allow you to do some more things with Web Stencils, but also to allow Web Broker and Web Stencils to more easily interact. So those are the things, very briefly, that we did for 13.0. If you look at the information on the product pages, so on the web pages, we've got a much more comprehensive breakdown of what we did, because there was a lot. And now, let's hand over to Marco to talk about the work that's been done on the Delphi compiler for Windows on ARM.
The most important new features in RAD Studio 13.1 is certainly the Delphi compiler for Windows on ARM. This is an entire new toolchain that we are introducing in Delphi to target Windows on ARM with the native applications built with the existing source code. These are applications that don't run using the Intel emulation layer, but are native ARM binaries that you can build for the Windows ARM devices that are available, or Windows ARM running on a VM on a non-Windows hardware. This allows developers to expand their Windows support because they can take the existing Win32 Intel application or Win64 Intel application and just rebuild them for Win64 ARM using the same source code. And we really expect that most of the existing applications will generally just be recompiled for the new target platform, specifically if they are already 64-bit applications. Otherwise, you'll have to make sure that your source code is 64-bit compatible, meaning your integers and pointers and other things have the proper layout and size. Technically, what we target is ARM64EC, emulation compatible, which is a Microsoft API that allows mixing native ARM code with emulated Intel code. There are multiple things you can run on Windows ARM, multiple type of binaries. You can run, of course, an ARM64 native binary. We can only load ARM64 modules. You can run an Intel application, which can run Intel libraries. You can also have this ARM64 EC model where you are building native ARM applications, but they can load also Intel DLLs and modules. In other words, this provides a higher compatibility because you can have an existing library, an existing DLL, and load it from within a native ARM application. Before we go to a demo, let me add a couple of fundamental things explaining the work we have done. First, this compiler is an LLVM-based compiler, like the other non-Windows compilers available in Delphi. This time we moved to a much more recent version of LLVM, specifically version 20, only for this compiler. The toolchain includes the full Delphi language, the entire runtime library, VCL, FireMonkey, FireDuck, Internet, Indy, and really almost everything we have in our system, with only one exception. We don't have today the ability to build runtime packages for ARM. That means you cannot use RAD server for the ARM target. ARM on Windows is available also more as an experiment for previous versions of the operating systems. We only support Windows 11 and Windows Server 2025 in the ARM variants. What does this mean in practice? What do you have to do to get your application to ARM? First, you need to install the Windows on ARM target platform in addition to the Windows target platform. It's an additional platform. It's not bolted into Windows. So in case you don't need it, you don't need to install the extra target. All you have to do is to open the 64-bit IDE, take an existing Windows application, add the new ARM target platform, activate it, and build. And that's it. And that's all it takes to build that application. At this point, if you have a Windows ARM computer, you can run it there. Of course, you cannot run a Windows ARM application on an Intel hardware. Let us show this in practice. This is a very simple VCL application with a couple of buttons and a list box, so no special code. And here it's working on Win64. We can run it. And one of the things that's going to happen is that the application is going to add the time to the list box or describe the platform it's running onto, which in this case is Intel x64. I can get back here, and now what I can do is go to the target platform, add a new platform, and the platform I can add is Windows on ARM 64-bit EC, and make this the active platform. And then all I have to do is get here and do build and build my app and create a binary that is ARM64 binary and not an Intel binary. Now I cannot run this application on this machine because this is a Windows machine. So let me copy it over to a different computer and show it running there. This is Windows on ARM running on a Mac technically, although you shouldn't see a difference. This is my application that I've copied here, and I can start. And of course, because I haven't code signed it, it's just my personal app. It's going to complain, but if I run it, here is my application running. And again, I can add the time, but I can also check the platform. And this time the platform is actually ARM64. I'm going to show you some of the details of the code I'm using to ask for the platforms in a later slide, so I don't want to get to it, but this is application running. And the other thing we can do is check on Task Manager. I need to go down because they are ordered alphabetically. Okay, this is my application, and as you can see, this is marked as ARM64 x64 compatible. That means it's an ARM64 EC binary built with Delphi. As we have seen in the demo, the Task Manager on Windows and ARM shows the format you're running executables. You can build an application that is an Intel 32-bit app and run it there, or 64-bit and run it there, or if you have a native application built with the ARM64 EC model, you will see x64 compatible flavor. But again, it's compatible, it's not emulated. It is a native ARM64 app to all effects. You can run applications that are much more interesting than my small introductory demo, and let's show some real ARM applications in action.
So what we have here is a VCL project, and it creates a dashboard, and you can see it's a VCL project because there's the VCL part of it. And at the moment it's 64-bit, so if I click on run, it will go off and compile, and there is the project. Doesn't really do much. It does draw this graph dynamically and this graph here, and generates some of this information dynamically as well, and that's all it does. So let's just go into here and select add platform, and now we're adding the ARM 64-bit platform. So again, run it, and there is an ARM 64-bit process. And just to make sure, if we go to the Task Manager and select this one, here's Clean Dash, and there's the architecture ARM64 compatible. So let's close that and let's do something even cooler. So we've got another one here that says Clean Dash Server. And if we run this one instead, what you'll see is this is a web broker project. So it's running immediately, and again it's called Clean Dash. And if I go into my web browser and go to 127.0.0.180, there is my my project running web stencils, the same code, generating this graph so that to prove that you can actually share the code. Doesn't really do much. If I go to here, there's nothing happening there, but you get the general gist of it. And if we just go back to here, click on stop to stop the project, and then say, okay, well, let's select add platform, Windows on ARM, there it is. And now if I hit build, goes off and builds it. It's running already because I've got it to run automatically. And again, if I go into here, 127.180, that is an ARM process running the server in the background. So VCL completely working on ARM. Let's just stop this and let's just open a different project. So let's open this one. Okay, now this is another little dashboard. It uses some third-party components. It's got a custom style book, some image list to make some pretty images appear here. And what this one is doing in the background is a FireMonkey project. So off the top of the bat, it's 64-bit Windows, because this is the 64-bit IDE. But also what I have in here is a data module, and I have a FireDAC connection connecting to an Interbase database. And if I run this one and click on here, it will load the data. Now it's loaded this dynamically, and I can actually get it to recreate it. So if I click on here, it will kill all those values. There's 1,000 values or something like that. And then when I click on here, it rereads it. So completely working, talking to Interbase, 64-bit, which is kind of what you would expect it to be able to do. But let's just go through and round off the whole thing by going to the targets. I've already added this target earlier on, but I know it will work. So ARM 64-bit, FireMonkey, but up it comes. Same data as the other 64-bit Windows app, but this is running as an ARM process. And once again, if I go into Task Manager and go down to Dark Dash, which is on here, Dark Dash, there you can see it's an ARM 64 compatible. And because it is a FireMonkey project, I can, of course, add other platforms, not in the 64-bit, but I could add in the iOS and Android platforms as well, and have the same app doing all of those. I could be adding the macOS platform, but the 64-bit IDE doesn't support that, but I could do that if I wanted to. So from the same source code, which is here, works for 64-bit Windows, 64-bit ARM, would also work on Mac, would also work on Linux using FMX Linux, and would also work on iOS and Android if I chose to. I mean, this is a desktop app, so it doesn't really make sense, but that's it. That's those are real live working applications.
Concepts and ideas and important observations around Delphi ARM 64 support. As mentioned, it's available only in the 64-bit IDE because it is a 64-bit compiler, and that's the direction the product is heading towards. The debugger uses LLDB for Windows on ARM. You can debug locally if you have RAD Studio installed on a Windows on ARM device, or you can debug using PA Server on a remote Windows on ARM machine or VM. A very important difference compared to the Windows Intel compilers is that the memory manager is different. The memory manager uses the platform UCRT and not FastMM. We are evaluating what to do in the future. UCRT is quite efficient in terms of performance, although it's not as efficient in some scenarios like string manipulation or memory pre-allocation compared to FastMM4. The other important thing to notice is that the image-based property, which is used to indicate where in memory your executable is loaded, there is now a separate 64-bit image base that is not only being used for ARM 64 EC, but also for Intel 64-bit compilations. Now, in terms of migration, the biggest hurdle is that if you have inline assembly, or in general terms, Intel assembly, that's not supported on ARM. So you might want to use one of the compiler defines to work around the Intel assembly and replace it with a pure Pascal implementation, or replace it with an external function that you can write with C or other languages and build natively for ARM. In terms of Windows API, the compatibility is extremely large. There are only a couple of caveats. The first is that virtual alloc will return pages where you cannot load code. And same for heap create and heap alloc. They cannot be used for runtime code injection. This is not a common practice, but it might be something that third-party components or advanced features use and won't be available as they are on the ARM platform. The other caveat is that the get native system info function, which is used internally by the RTL TOS version .architecture calls, is meant by Microsoft to offer compatibility. So it will return the emulated CPU if the application is running emulated on ARM, as if it's an Intel application running emulated on ARM, but we will also indicate that it's running on Intel if you are on ARM 64 EC, because again, Microsoft's goal is increase the level of compatibility. And you might want to load an Intel library if you're running on Intel. And so this emulation kind of try to match that scenario. If you want to know which is the processor the application is running on, we recommend using is Windows 64 Process 2. This is an API that will give the specific CPU currently being executed at this time. In terms of linking external object files, we don't support the automatic merging with the L command line. What you have to do is declare an external symbol, and you can use the external object syntax to link an individual object file, although we recommend linking to a static library that you can create separately. Just declare that you're linking against one of the functions in the library. This is also what we've been doing to implement some of our own low-level RTL functions. In terms of DLL compatibility, ARM64EC enables this hybrid execution model, so you can load an ARM64EC DLL or you can load an x64 DLL without any restriction, without any extra special syntax, or without anything in particular. You just declare the function from a DLL and it should just work out of the box. What you cannot do is load a pure ARM64 DLL, but only ARM64EC DLL. So the DLLs you are building with Delphi, you can load in a Delphi ARM application. That's all for ARM. Let's move to other changes to compilers and platforms. Maxim will start covering C++.
Hi, I'm Maxim Menshkov, and I'm managing C++ group development. While 13.0 was a big release with many new features, in 13.1 we concentrated on small improvements of our compilation environment. First, we have added several tools to our CLang distribution, like CLang scan depths. Second, the most anticipated improvement was about Windows SDK import. We heard your feedback and changed the way we work with it. From now on, SDK import no longer gives errors if several versions are installed, or if unsupported version is installed. Of course, we support the latest SDK too. We are listening to your feedback and hope to improve your development process more soon. Thank you.
Thanks, Maxim. In terms of the Delphi compiler, we haven't done a lot of change because, of course, the focus was primarily on the new Delphi Windows ARM compiler. But we've done a few things that are worth mentioning because they are tied to recent work done on the Delphi language for 13.0 Florence. The first thing is we fixed a regression with ambiguous calls when using ANSI-char and short string. For example, when calling pause, there were some scenarios where the compiler would not be able to determine which of the versions you were calling and will just issue an ambiguous error. Now this has been addressed in 13.1. We've also improved some of the floating point and integer type compatibility when using the new ternary if operator. So when the two sides of the if are floating point and integer, you often got incompatibility errors. And now in some of the scenarios, the compiler will be able to handle the type difference and make sure the code works smoothly. The other change relates to the no return directive we introduced in 13.0. There is a new warning message that is triggered when you are marking a procedure or function as no return, but you actually have a return path. So a scenario in which you do not raise an exception as expected. And because this is uncommon and should not happen, we are issuing a warning that was not there in 13.0. Talking about platforms, we have done significant work for both Android and iOS. For Android, we've added support for API level 36.1, which is mandatory. Actually, version 36 is mandatory starting next August. We have updated the SDK installation. We have upgraded the build system and the platform jar files, updated the usage permissions. So there are new permissions that are that have been introduced by Android for API level 36. We have upgraded the version of the Jetpack core library. Finally, we added support for opting out of the predictive back button navigation feature that's been available since Android 16. This specific change requires a change in the manifest. So to enable this change, if you are moving from 13.0 to 13.1, you'll have to clear the configuration under Update Embarcadero BDS 37. Otherwise, you'll keep using the same configuration of 13.0 and you will not have this feature enabled in your application. If you're installing 13.1 and there's no 13.0 installed, then you'll be good. Now on Android, we've done a few more changes. We have enabled building a separate DLL or shared object library for Android with a specific option that's passed to the compiler. And also we have improved the detection of the Android SDK path for different types of existing installations. For example, we're looking if you have an Android home environment variable or the old Android SDK root variable. If those are not there, if you have installed the Android SDK NDK get it package, which is what you get if you enable the option to install the Android SDK when you are installing the platform on RAD Studio. Finally, we also check the Android Studio installation directory for the SDK. So if you do not install via our installation, but you have an existing pre-installed Android SDK, we should be much better in detecting it and integrating it with the RAD Studio IDE. On the iOS front, we are adding official support for iOS 26. We've increased also the minimum iOS version number. And all of this is important because you want to keep your applications working smoothly on the most recent version of iOS, but also remain compatible with the requirements on the App Store. The big change we've done, which is tied to this upgrade, is the migration from UI Scene lifecycle to UI Kit lifecycle. Now it looks very technical, I know. This is a significant change to the workflow. It required, for example, a redesign of modal dialogues and a few other changes in the library. And most importantly, this requires change on the info plist configuration file. So if you have built an existing application with an existing info plist, you have to refresh it. Otherwise, you're going to use the old definition from the previous versions of RAD Studio. That is all for platforms. Let's now start looking into the RAD Studio IDE. And the first thing is looking into the change we've done around Delphi LSP, and that is going to be covered by Nuno.
Hello everyone, Nuno Castro here, PM for Delphi LSP and RAD Studio Code Tooling. Today, I want to introduce support for LSIF, or Language Service Index formats, in the Delphi LSP architecture. The main goal of LSP is to reduce the Delphi LSP dependencies on the compiler. This improves performance, improves stability, and also the accuracy of code insights. The important idea is that LSIF uses pre-generated semantic data. So, instead of asking the compiler for information every time we navigate, the IDE can load the LSIF file for a package and use data directly. This is especially important when navigating into libraries that were not built in the current project context. In the past, when the language server had to navigate into those libraries, especially if they were built with different configurations, that could make Delphi LSP unstable, and sometimes even require a restart. With LSIF, that navigation becomes much faster and much more reliable, because the semantic information was already generated in advance. When building a package, we can now generate an LSIF file for it. Then, when the IDE uses units from that package, it can load the LSIF file instead of compiling in the background. This is currently used mainly for navigation requests, such as go-to definition and over information. And, if needed, the LSIF caching can also be turned off with a registry setting, as you can see. Now, we have an important clarification. Because LSIF does not apply everywhere automatically. LSIF only works when the source code you are currently navigating in also has LSIF available. So the benefit is strongest when looking at symbols inside the source code of units that are part of packages which include LSIF. A single example is tform. If you click on tform in my own unit 1, that lookup still goes through the compiler. But if you click on tform inside forms.pass or any other VCL core unit, that has LSIF data. Then that navigation goes through LSIF. That distinction is very important. The big benefit comes once we are inside those frameworks or package units, because those are exactly the places where configuration differences used to create instability for Delphi LSP. For RAD Studio, this matters because our own libraries will ship with LSIF generation. That means navigation inside our framework should become much more stable and responsive now. For third-party libraries, vendors should aim to provide LSIF files as well. If they have the source, that is the best way to help customers to get stability improvements when using external components. One practical recommendation is that third-party vendors should enable LSIF generation for their final package builds, rather than for everyday development builds. This because generating LSIF can add some overheads to compile times. And finally, for customers with large code bases, Delphi Code Advisor is still very important today, especially to identify and fix issues like circular references. LSI helps a lot with navigation stability, but the Code Advisor is still one of the best tools for improving the overall performance of your large projects. And that's it for today. And now over to Marco again.
Another very nice change in the RAD Studio IDE for 13.1 is the complete integration of the bookmarks plugin, which was previously available in Get It and required a separate download and installation. Now the plugin is fully integrated into the IDE. It comes out of the box and it replaces the older bookmark support in the IDE. And being a superset of the features, it's really not much that we dropped in terms of capabilities. You can still create bookmarks with a specific number and a specific location, or you can use the new mechanism, which allows you to just create a bookmark with the next available number out of the box. The UI is the new UI for the bookmarks plugin, which offers a lot of extended features. It offers the ability to preview the current bookmark locations in a bookmarked window. It has extensive configuration in the options dialog. And overall, it has a much nicer look and feel and behavior. Notice that outside of the traditional bookmarks, it also includes the caret bookmarks features, which I personally like a lot. It's the ability to drop a temporary caret bookmark, so a bookmark not just into a line, but also into the horizontal position into the line, a specific location in the source code, and then move around the code and possibly add more caret bookmarks, and then jump back from them on the stack of bookmarks using the escape key. So it's very, very easy navigation, which I'm going to demo in a second after showing you the overall bookmarks feature in action. Let me get back to this application I was describing earlier. And now we can get to the code, not because I really want to show you the code, but I want to show you how I can add a bookmark to the event handler. This just by adding Control Shift and the number. I can do another bookmark. This time I'm picking 3. The bookmarks work as the all-time bookmarks where you can just select a name. But the other way bookmarks work in this new integration is that you can add one without specifying a number, and it will just pick the first available number. So that's going to be 2, and now it's 4 because 3 is already available, and so forth. And then bookmarks can also be in multiple units. So I can do another one here. I can just go to one of the bookmarks. It's a much nicer UI compare what we had. Now, there is also another option, which is the ability to view the entire set of bookmarks. Under the View Tools windows, there is this bookmark page, and here you can see the bookmarks available in the current file or the bookmarks available in the various files that are open in the IDE. And again, you can just select one of them and jump to it. And because they display a summary of the actual text and the location, it's really very handy to figure out which bookmarks you want to go through, even if you have a long set of items available. This is really a much nicer experience than the bookmarks that were available in the IDE without installing the plugin in the past. One other feature I want to show you is the caret bookmarks. So again, supposedly I'm looking into some code. I'm here, and I can just set a caret bookmarks, which is shown in a different way. And then I control click, I move to another piece of code, say, oh, that's interesting. Let me put another bookmark here. And then I go into architecture, which moves into the sysutils, and let me add another bookmark. And then I want to see the T architecture data type. So I'm just navigating through some data structures and some information. And now I'm just pressing escape to jump back to the previous location, and then press escape again to jump back to the previous location, and so forth. I can also see in the bookmarks again, then there is a caret bookmark, actually two. On left, one is my current position, and one is the previous one. So again, it's a different navigational model, very handy, very interesting, and lets you move around the code faster than in the past. There are other features we added to the RAD Studio IDE, along with the Delphi LSP enhancements and the bookmark support. One of them is the ability to save DFM files at 96 dpi regardless of the design DPI that is selected in the IDE. So if you have the need of sharing DFM files across different installations of RAD Studio with different team members, or the same person with different devices that have high DPI or lower DPI configurations, rather than having the forms incompatible or having to be adjusted on load by the different developers, what you can do is enable this optional setting, which is off by default, which allows you every time you're saving a DFM file to save it at 96 dpi regardless of your configuration. That means that every other developer is going to use the same setting, and all of your files are saved at 96 dpi. That means that when you are loading them, they're going to be rescaled up to high DPI. But of course, if you're using external images or the new image list and image collection with the different resolutions, everything is going to look smooth and clean. We've also updated the IDE styles for Windows 11, modernizing the look and feel of the IDE, and we've provided 3 of them, like in the past: light, dark, and mountain mist. The styles will be loaded if you're running the IDE under Windows 11, otherwise they will fall back to using the matching Windows 10 styles. We have the new style. We also have rounded edges around many windows, and a specific setting for you to pick the type of edges you want for tabs in the editor. We have done a small improvement to the attach to process dialog by displaying the icons of the process you're attaching to. Makes it easier to find a specific application by having the icon displayed alongside with the application name. And we've done a significant refresh on the UI for the product registration and license management dialogues. We have enabled high DPI mode for both of them. we have adopted VCL styles because these are in all effect VCL application. We have replaced some of the icons and changed the fonts and done some overall improvements without changing the actual behavior, which should remain exactly the same as in the past. Let's take a quick look at change to the libraries. In terms of VCL, as I mentioned, we have adopted new IDE styles, but we've also created new styles which are more specifically tied to Windows 11 and the Windows 11 look and feel. These 6 new styles are available with RAD Studio 13.1, and we are aiming at adding one more in the near future on Get It. We've done another small experimental change in the IDE, which is the ability to do simple calculations in some of the numeric properties in the object inspector, specifically the 4 positional properties of any T control. And what you can do is type an expression. The object inspector will replace it with the actual result. Now, the expression is not maintained or kept over time, so it's only a simple way to avoid shooting out a calculator if you want to have buttons that are at a given distance or given position. I personally recommend try to avoid positional properties as much as you can and go for more adaptive layouts. But if you're using positional properties, this might come handy. In terms of FireMonkey, we have done really a very, very significant change to the platform by making available a brand new FireMonkey style designer. This is very different from the existing Bitmap style designer, which was originally a VCL style designer that can also generate FireMonkey styles with a conversion layer. The new FireMonkey style designer is really a complete replacement of the existing model. It uses its own format, although of course it can generate FMX styles. The other big difference is that it's not meant as a tool for developers, but is meant as a tool for designers. Now, developers can probably use it, but it's meant to follow modern design principles and allows you to have a lot of flexibility in the architecture and in the layout of your styles. For example, if you just look at this screenshot, you can see there are a few different layouts for rectangles, but they all share the same color. Rather than configuring the color for each of them in the specific style, what we have done here is define a primary color and then refer to that primary color in the different elements. That means that you can change that primary color and all of your style will adapt to the new coloring scheme that you are selecting. The goal is to have a faster, more flexible and modern UI styling architecture. You can really think it with high-level concepts of colors, background, typography, and fonts, and interaction states. And then, as I mentioned, the tool will automatically transform this layout and this architecture into the actual FireMonkey style format that you can load into your application. The nice thing is also built with FireMonkey, so it showcases the framework capabilities for building a nice professional desktop tool. And as I mentioned, it's meant for you to be used by developers, but also by graphic UI designers. So if you have a designer that's working alongside the dev team, this is really a tool that can be used with someone without a specific development experience, just needs to understand the overall logic of FireMonkey styles, and this person can build fantastic style for you. There are a few core concepts. There are parameters that are defined up front. There are resources, which are visual building blocks. What is very important is the hierarchical organization that's based on naming conventions. The other key concept is that it uses a state-based design. But rather than going through this in theory, which is probably going to be very boring, let's get an actual demo, and I've invited Antonio to help us out here with a quick demo of the FireMonkey style designer.
Thanks, Marco. This is the new FireMonkey style designer shipped with RAD Studio 13.1, and I'm going to walk you through building a button style from scratch. Here on the left panel, if we right click, we have multiple options, one of them being add style. We simply need to select button. For the name, it's important to keep meaningful names, and let's name this one button primary. Pay attention to this little dash I put in the middle, because that helps us create a hierarchy of items that will be easy in the future to organize all your styles. So it's a very neat built-in solution. Here we have a very important property on the right of the item we have selected, which is the FireMonkey style name. We need to define something meaningful as well, because this is the name we will see in RAD Studio. And RAD Studio will filter the styles by name. So if we put button in the name, it will be assigned automatically to all the objects and components that have button. So if I name this one, for example, style primary, I won't have access to it in buttons, for example. So let's name this one button primary. And now we need to assign a background. For backgrounds, we're going to select dynamic image. This allows us, well, let's assign a name. Allows us to define different states and different colors or shapes if you want to. You have normal, hovered, focus, etc. We want to create a rectangle, which is an SVG. We could select our own SVG path or dynamic image if we wanted to. In this case, we just want a plain rectangle. Let's name this one background primary. And now the only thing we need to do is to assign a color. Yet again, we press plus and we assign the name primary. And now we have our color here. At the moment it's transparent, but we can use the color picker here. We have the alpha channel here in case we want to define some transparency, and let's select, let's say, a bluish color like so. I'm going to copy this in my clipboard for the next properties. And now if we come back to our background primary, we see that we have assigned correctly the color. We need to repeat the same thing for hovered and pressed. These are the two we're going to define for this button. Let's name this one background primary hovered. And this one we're going to assign the same fill color. Primary hovered. I paste the color. And the only thing I'm going to do, I'm going to make it a slightly darker because we're, lighter, because when we hover, we want it slightly lighter. If we come here, and now we create not focused, pressed, rectangle, background, primary, pressed, fill color, primary, pressed, and we put the same color, but this time is slightly darker. And there you go. We've defined all this. And now if we come back to our button primary, we can see that we have the button. And now we can preview the result right here when we hover. And if I click, it goes darker as well. But we can improve this a bit more. We can come here and we have access to corners radius. We could create as well a token, like a size token that we could reuse in our whole project. In this case, we're going to just define our corner radius of 16 and the 3 rectangles. But as I say, the best practice, it would be defining a size token that we could change automatically in the future. Now we have the button. And the next thing we need to do, if we want to, we could create a shadow. Let's name this one shadow MD. That's also good practice to have different types of shadows and define the values so we can reuse them in multiple places. The direction, let's put this 90. The distance, let's put 10. And opacity 1.3 and softness 0.8. So we have a subtle shadow, and off we go. We have the shadow already assigned. The next step, it will be to export this to FireMonkey format so we can import it in RAD Studio. We simply need to come here, File, Export. Now we define a name here. Let's put it here in data and let's name it my style. And now we only need to come here to RAD Studio. We create a multi-device application, aka FMX. We drop a style book. We assign the style book to the form. We double click on the style form. We open the file we just created, which is a binary already exported. We close and apply. And now we simply need to drop a button. And if we come to the properties, we come to style lookup, we should have our button primary right here. And off you go. We have a button that now we created directly in the new FMX style designer. And of course, we can carry on tweaking here if we want to. We can change the font, we can change the color. This is a very, very brief introduction because the options are almost limitless. And the best part is, like, if I want to change the primary colors, once I've started using them in multiple components, I only need to come here to my primary color, change it, and it will cascade all the changes automatically to all my components. Over to you, Marco.
Thanks, Antonio. If the FireMonkey Style Designer was the biggest and most relevant change to FireMonkey in 13.1, there are a few other things worth mentioning. One is the new tinted glyph control, which allows you to recolor elements that come from an image list. And recoloring meaning that you can separate the graphical layout from the actual color that's displayed on screen by changing the tint color of a component. Similar concept was already introduced for speed button tinted style objects, and now this is a more general implementation of the same concept. We've also updated Skia for Delphi to a newer version, added support for DirectX textual filtering, added support for Linux styles and views in the designer. Although FMX Linux remains a separate installation on Getit, the integration in the RAD Studio IDE is much smoother and is very similar to that for the other platforms and styles. And we have made a lot of quality improvements. One worth calling out is the improved frame alignments and margins. Now let's talk about a couple of other product areas. In terms of database access, FireDAC has extended drivers to cover new databases that you can see listed here, from SAP ASA Server version 16.1 to IBM DB2 12.1 to MariaDB Server 12.1. We have also made available the legacy FireDAC SQLite encryption for 64-bit Windows. We really don't recommend using the legacy SQLite encryption because it's based on an old version of SQLite. We recommend either moving to a newer version of native SQLite encryption, or even better, consider moving to IB2Go, the embedded interface with full encryption support. In terms of the internet space, there's been a number of improvements and quality fixes. The most notable change is the introduction of the server send events SSE feature, which is part of HTTP. This is now available both on the server side with TWeb response stream class and new methods for streaming events, and on the client side with a new unit, which is specifically called HTTP SSE, and a new THTTP event and event source objects. Why is server-side events relevant? Why are we introducing it now? Because this is one of the core technologies that is used for MCP support, which is what everyone is talking about in the AI space. So MCP is pushing the request for server send events, and that's why we decided to offer the core implementation out of the box in the RAD Studio HTTP libraries. A couple of additional features. We've added the Apache configuration support that was introduced in Delphi in 13.0. We've added it to C++ Builder as well. We are enable fast fallback of the WinHTTP client from IPv6 to IPv4. Finally, we've offered a version of RAD Server Lite, which integrates support for TLS 1.3, so full OpenSSL3 encryption, integrated with RAD Server Lite out of the box. These are some of the most relevant things, but of course, we've done a lot more in terms of quality and improvements and modernization, specifically focused on the modern C++ compiler, on the LLDB debuggers, on the runtime libraries, and in many, many areas of the integrated development environment. In terms of reports, we've addressed around 60 support cases and over 250 public reports from customers. And internally, we have addressed more than 1,000 internal tickets in our system. There is a lot in this release outside of the core fundamental features like the Delphi ARM support that is worth taking a look at.
So to recap, the summary for 13.1, the top themes are Delphi for Windows on ARM, and that's the way we're going to describe it, Windows on ARM. Delphi LSP LSIF support to help speed up LSP, and it's a caching mechanism, but it does all sorts of other exciting things as well. We hope it will significantly contribute towards quality in Delphi LSP. Save as 96 DPI, so you'll be able to save your forms as 96 DPI, which is very, very useful for those people that are working in teams, and those teams have different monitor resolutions and dots per inch on their monitors. Save as 96 DPI will help solve a lot of the problems that people used to have before. And some new specific VCL Windows 11 styles, a modernizing style to make things look up to date. Improved Windows SDK integration. The bookmarks plugin, which used to be separate and was originally from Parnassus, is now completely integrated into the IDE, and it's got things like persistence between saving of projects and things like that, and lots of other things that people really liked about it. Android API level 36, the very latest, which will be required later on in the year by Google for any submissions to the Play Store. So very important. We're getting in there early. I think it's August that it's mandatory, but don't quote me on that. Check the details. But I know it's not for a while yet, and we're ahead of the curve. Plus quality and many other smaller enhancements as well. Lots going on as always. And thank you. We'll now go over to the live Q&A.
All right. Fair bit in there to talk about. Before we get into that, though, a couple of things I just wanted to put up for people, given we might people might start dropping off as time starts to call them. Couple of things. If you are wondering, yeah, I realise it's not lunchtime. But anyway, so a couple of things. If you are wanting to get more details of what's in, we want to get access to the feature matrix, all that sort of stuff. If you go to scan this QR code, that's a link off to the Embarcadero website. Yeah, that way. Yes, I got lucky. I pointed the right way first. That has links off to all of that stuff, so you'll be able to get feature matrix, everything like that. I also put the link into the chat if you want something physical, or not physical, but if you want something to click on rather than scanning it on your phone, go for it. Also, the other thing we get, it's probably not so bad given 13 wasn't that long ago, but we often get people at this sort of stage of the cycle who can't remember what the serial number is, can't remember how to download the new version, all that sort of stuff. If that's you, don't feel bad. Just scan this one. There's an article there on all of that stuff. How to grab the install, both the web and the web install and the ISO. How to find your serial number. What to do if your serial number says it's not. Your subscription's not active. All that sort of stuff. Yep. If you get to the end of that and you really can't work out what's going on, then yell out. Come to, scan that one, or again, I'll put the link in the chat. ask us. We'll help you get it sorted out. Yeah, it's not a problem at all. Now, I don't want to take that QR code away too quickly, but I do want to put up the next one, which is just to highlight, if, you know, webinars are great. Hopefully you're having a good time on this one. But if you are hanging out for some face-to-face events, be aware that the ADUG Symposium is on in May. And for the first time, I think, since COVID, all of the speakers will actually be in the room. There's been, you know, during COVID, obviously, nobody was in the room. There was no room. But gradually since then, you know, some of the speakers have still been online, but this year they've made a real effort to get everyone there. There's a bunch of sessions you'll see on the website if you scan it. A couple of sessions on AI. Alistair Christie's doing a session on automated tools to help you clean up your source code and produce better quality source code. So that should be interesting. Alistair's always a great presenter.
Awesome. Alistair.
And there's one that I'm particularly interested in. Yes, there's one that I'm particularly interested in, which might just say is that they're doing a session on. I read this. It used to be, you know, taking an application that started with dairy herd management, full dairy shed automation. I'm so looking forward to this.
Oh, Malcolm, your camera's disappeared.
And then there'll be, of course, lots of people, you know, people in the room to have a chat and catch up on, and discussions in between sessions. So yeah, ADUG Symposium's on in May. Come along. It would be great to see you there. I think that's all of the housekeeping I had. So let's talk about some of what we just saw. Ian, where do you want to start?
Well, first of all, I'll say hello to a couple of people, because some of these people email me quite regularly, or they message me on ADUG. I do hang out in ADUG. I'm sure, Malcolm, you've seen me there, but I do hang out on the forum there. I try to, being British American, which is a weird kind of continent. Every country in the world has got a good reason to hate me for some reason or other, but not me personally. You know, but I don't know. You know. But speaking as and your camera keeps disappearing. It's pretty weird. But
yeah.
There you go. What was I going to say? Yes, but I do hang out on ADUG. So if you know, I do try and help answer questions. But there's so many good people on there that actually I don't. You know, most of the time there are a lot better people than me answering questions there. And it's the same with someone saying as well, oh, thanks for the you know, the Oz friendly time zone presentation. Yes, I think that's important. I don't want people to think that, you know, Australia, New Zealand and you know, the Southern Hemisphere is any less important. In fact, there are a significant number of users that are not anywhere near America, even though Embarcadero is theoretically based in Austin, Texas. It's a very multicultural and multinational crew of people. I typically have meetings with, you know, 7 or 8 different countries involved. So we are everywhere, and we are all in different time zones. And I will make the effort to turn up, you know, for Australia. So if you do have any user group meetings, you want me to turn up virtually, as long as I don't get too many in a week, I will turn up for it. So thanks for the support, especially from ADUG. They do a great thing. So the one thing I did want to talk about was the style designer, because Antonio did a very good demonstration of it, but it's one of these features that is a bit subtle that you don't realize quite how good it is. And if I'd been doing the demo, I would have labeled it a bit more. You know what I'm like. So the thing.
Well, here's your chance, Ian. Here's your chance.
Exactly. Yeah, I get my chance. But the thing about the style designer is that, first of all, we don't have a link directly to it. So the path that you saw in the chat there is the way to get to it. It's in the RAD Studio directory. I don't know why we don't have a direct link to it in the IDE. You can always go create a tools option and add it yourself. But it's one of the things I'm going to ask someone to fix as a patch in the future. Add it into the IDE as a shortcut. I don't know why we're doing that. If you select the style designer from the menu in the IDE, you'll get the old version, which is the bitmap style designer. Okay, so that is the old version that has been there for years and years and years. If you want the new cool looking one that does all these colors and has got the idea, Antonio mentioned you can create tokens for sizes. Once you get your head around how it works, because it is a little bit kind of a lot of information to take in, you can actually say large, small, medium sized, and it will scale up and things like that. But the rounded buttons and shadows, but it does allow you to emulate things like material design and all those other things. You can put borders around things and stuff like that. So it's a great feature. It does not allow you to open an existing style and then work on the existing style. You can work on an existing style created with that style designer, but what you can't do is take one that's already there from the previous bitmap style designer. The styles are not compatible. What it does do is when it saves out, it saves a binary compiled version of style for FileMonkey that will work. So it will work in older versions of RAD Studio as well. But you can't take an existing style. That was one of the questions that came up earlier on. Lots of people mentioning CodeBot. Yes, they're still doing that, and also some other things as well, like Chucky and a few others. A lot of AI stuff going on. We are planning on doing some updates to our AI stuff, and some webinars coming along with AI as well. But right now, obviously, the focus is on 13.1, and Marco did mention it, but we actually put a lot of bug fixes into this build. So although there are some new features, the main core feature, which was very labor intensive for us, was the ARM support, and we actually worked with Microsoft on that. I didn't sign an NDA, so I think I can say this without being sued, but Microsoft actually worked with us and gave us some equipment to work on that to encourage us. Now, the good story behind this is the reason they did that is they have some very large customers who are mutual customers of ours, and they wanted these customers to be able to get the best experience and needed them to have ARM executables. So they kind of came to us and said, hi, you guys are kind of central to what we need to do with ARM. Can you implement the ARM compiler? Now, like I said, I don't think I'm breaching any confidences. So if you see me not around in the future, you know I was wrong and I should have said it. But that was why the ARM compiler was kind of really came out the way it is. You cannot load external packages with the ARM compiler. It uses LLVM, and the way that LLVM works is it just doesn't allow you to support that. All of the third-party people like Ray Konopka's controls, which are very popular, they already support ARM as well. If you download the latest version, it will automatically work with ARM. You can't have ARM in the 32-bit IDE. It's only in the 64-bit IDE. So that's probably
during. I know I'm not meant to talk. The beta is a bit like Fight Club. You're not meant to talk about the beta. But assuming there was a hypothetical beta that took place during the beta, we were working on one of our customer projects. And just the timing was amazing because they had got they're kind of large corporate, and they just got a directive that future desktops were going to be ARM based. Like it's sort of at the point now where it's more affordable. It's cheaper for companies to buy ARM machines than Intel, and so it was great timing. We basically, just as the beta hit, like the same week, I think we got this request from someone saying, how feasible is it to do ARM?
NVIDIA have just announced today, actually, weirdly enough, a bunch of ARM chips. weirdly, and it kind of strengthened our case. It was just sheer luck. I mean, we obviously didn't know about it, but they said it's so many $billion market or something like that for their chips, and of course, Microsoft involvement makes me think that somebody else knows something we don't, us mere mortals don't know. But clearly, ARM is the way to go. For those of you that want to develop ARM and say, well, how do I do that? The easiest way is to get something like a Mac Mini. They're fairly cheap machines. You can run Windows ARM on there. I actually personally have a MacBook Air M4. I am going to upgrade later in the year once I've sold both my kidneys and my lungs so that I can afford it, to the big new Mac M6 that's coming out. But a Mac Mini, it'll have an ARM chip on it, and you can run Windows ARM on there, so you can test ARM compatibility. That's what I was doing. That's what Marco has a Mac as well, I think. And
that's what I'm doing as well. I mean, what we found, like a bunch of my guys don't have it, but what we found is if they did the conversion from Win32 to Win64 Intel, once they'd done that, it was pretty much just jump over and compile, and you were away on ARM64. I think there was only one thing we found where we actually needed to debug on ARM hardware.
Yeah, that debugging still.
Yeah.
But the only things that have been real stoppers for people have been things like inline assembly.
Yeah.
There are some other things as well. Inlining of functions works differently under LLVM. I've seen someone saying, and hands up to God, or whoever. This is the first version we've done. It would be an absolute miracle that if everything was absolutely perfect, we run it through lots of tests. We provided hardware, like I say, from Microsoft, and a bunch of tests as well. We do the best we can, but it would be an absolute miracle if everything, was smooth. However, I know plenty of people that have got very large projects that they had already converted to 64-bit. They flipped it over to ARM and almost, no problems whatsoever. A couple of bits where they didn't know they had inline assembly, for example.
Yeah.
We had to change the runtime so that some of the RTL and the VCL and things like that had assembly in it to optimize it. We had to obviously conditionally define that out. Yeah, it's great. It's very good. Yeah. And you saw my demos. By the way, those demos that I showed you were written originally just using, I think, 13.0. They weren't written as ARM demos, but I just hit recompile. They work. So
we found that your sort of bread and butter Delphi database application just works. The only places we had issues were places where we were, I won't say trying to be smart, but where we were doing particular things that were a little bit out of the ordinary, and that but that's to be expected, I guess.
Yeah, and Interbase 15 has got ARM drivers as well. So you saw me using an Interbase app, and it just works straight away. Yeah. It's interesting stuff, and the difference is it's ARM EC. That stands for Extended Compatibility, and that is a Microsoft thing. It allows you to run Intel and ARM DLLs, which is very clever. It emulates the Intel on an ARM machine. But the ARM stuff is ARM, and it works, and it's great. It's the big ticket item for us, obviously, for this build. But there are plenty of other things as well. Some of them are quite minor, but I saw someone mention about the server-side events.
Yeah.
Sent events. They're quite. There you go. Well, that was very impressive. It was instant click. SSE support, that's actually something that was asked for and very popular with people. Yeah. And if you are doing server-side stuff with web stencils, that works with ARM as well, just in case. I predict that, in 2 years' time, there will be environments where people say, no, everything's got to be ARM or we're not going to support it. So I think that's the way it's going to go. And it's interesting also that Apple released that did they call it the Neo? I think, which is like a Chromebook alike. Did you see it?
Oh,
Apple
okay.
Neo.
Yeah.
It's a cheapo version of a Mac, basically, and that runs an ARM processor, but it's a equivalent of a phone processor.
Mm.
It's only got 8 gig of RAM, so you can't really use Xcode with it, for example. So if you're thinking you're going to get away and use it for iOS development, probably not. I personally developed some iOS apps that are actually used in the wild by real normal people, and in business. And I used a Mac Mini for years, and the Mac Mini is absolutely fine for developing iOS apps. Android, obviously, you can use your Windows PC, and but Mac apps, you've got to have a Mac.
Yeah.
There's nothing around it somewhere.
Well, I always think that once you see the corporate procurement departments and purchasing departments move, then you know that something's going to be adopted. And like I said, this customer recently, that was coming straight from their procurement department. So it seems like that sort of ship, which doesn't turn quickly, is starting to turn. So
Yeah, and there's some amazing things that go on with Delphi, because people always say, oh, it's not so popular as it used to be and things like that. The problem is it's so robust and stable that it never goes wrong. How many times have you seen, in back old days, it used to say guru meditation when some web page crashed, and you see ASP errors on websites, and Delphi doesn't do that kind of stuff. It just keeps going, and it's a blessing and a curse, because the blessing is that you can go and get a Delphi 7 app, take it, write it under Windows XP, and it'll probably run under the latest version of Windows even today, which is great for the developer who says, I'm not upgrading it ever, but horrible for us because, we want you to upgrade to the latest version. Of course, you're missing out on billions of things like Unicode, stuff like that. But the other blessing and the curse really of Delphi is that because it is so stable and people don't whinge about the apps crashing and it can't do this, it can't do that. I mean, some people want features we don't have, but we don't get a lot of chatter about it, and most of the source code for Delphi is in corporate repositories hidden away so that AI can't get to it. The search engines think we don't exist. There is a lot of open source code out there, but it's frustrating for us. I do my best to let people know, but you'd be surprised. European Space Agency, I heard a very big customer today who I can't say the name of at the moment, but we're hoping that they will allow us to discuss them. But when we talk about the names of these people, it's a big thumbs up in favor of Delphi, because not only have they been using it for years, but they are using it for some very high profile new projects in ways that you would just be blown away by. So I'm going to encourage them to talk about it in public, but we shall see how it goes.
Just having a quick flick through the chat to see if there's anything left. Yes, there will be a replay up on YouTube. I see Mark is saying about an email with links. Yes, we can do that. Not a problem. Anything else in there you want to cover off, Ian?
Someone's saying Ian Branch or Ian B, who emails me from time to time, and we call each other Ian B just for the heck of it. He said, I noticed the bookmarks are still the files on the drive are still called Parnassus. Well, Ian, if you want to split hairs, if you look there, you'll see files that are still called Borland. So we can rename things for the heck of it if you like, but it was, yes, the bookmarks were originally Parnassus. We have actually improved them and worked on them, increased some stability on it and added some features. And you see the syntax highlighting of the bookmarks and stuff like that. That came out in 13.0 as well. Everywhere in 13.0, you can search things now. And a lot of the windows that you get also have syntax highlighting as well. So when you see properties and things like that, it makes a lot more sense, and code snippets and stuff like that.
Okay, here's one we might want to just quickly cover off. It's probably a common question.
You can just load it over the top and it'll start up and it'll use all your third party. The only thing that you will need to do is, if you've installed some things from Get It, that are add-ins. So a typical thing would be, I'm trying to think of one that I always, just 1 second. I'm now heading up for my 16th hour of doing this today, so my voice is starting to complain a bit. Yeah, if you've got some add-in that you've installed from Getit, or component packs like Ray's components, for example, that puts a menu item in there, make a note of it. So go into Getit, there's a option that says installed. Select that and make a note of the things you've got installed. I know it's clunky, we're doing something about it, we haven't done it yet, but note those and uninstall the add-ins before you then upgrade. Once you upgrade, all of your third-party controls that you've bought, let's say DevExpress or DevArt or TMS, all of those will still be there and they'll still work. No problem whatsoever. They won't disappear. Is 13.1 compatible with 13, which is I think probably where you're going with that, Malcolm, as well? The answer is yes. So you don't need to sorry, component vendors, but you don't need to go and upgrade or buy a new version specifically for 13.1. However, there is an exception to that. If you have got a component pack for 13 that you bought, say, 6 months ago, it may not have ARM compatibility, even if it could, because obviously the ARM compiler wasn't available. So if you are looking at doing ARM apps and you've got some controls that you are you want to use in those ARM apps and they're third-party controls, then you might need to go to the vendor and get an updated version. The Kinotka controls, and I think a few of the others that are available and Get It are already updated. And while we're on the subject of controls as well, you install them in the 32-bit IDE from Get It, and then when you go into the 64-bit IDE, they will be installed. At the moment, Get It in the 64-bit IDE is read-only, so you can't install in the 64-bit IDE anything from Get It. You have to do it in the 32-bit IDE. I get it. Joke intended. It's a problem, but we're working towards this. The IDE, the 64-bit IDE, excuse me, is functional, but it's still a work in progress. We aim to get to complete parity between 32-bit IDE and the 64-bit IDE, but it's a Herculean task. There's a lot to it. It's a lot of work, and you know, we don't have the budget that Microsoft do. We spend a lot of money on it, but there's a limit. We want to keep, you know, what's the word I'm looking for? Liquid, you know, like financially viable. So we can't put 450 people just to fix the Get It dialogue, for example, or something like that. That's what Microsoft did. Except, of course, they're actually cutting back on all their developers, Microsoft, weirdly enough. They think they can do it all with AI. I suspect those people will be rehired again soon, but we'll see how it works. AI can do a lot, but it's not yet there yet. 100% trustworthy. Been playing around with Claude Code and Web Stencils. Started the Web Stencils demo project and then got Claude Code to create the site. Pretty amazing what can be done. Yes, I have a subscription to Claude, and I have a paid subscription, not the entry level one, and I also have a Google AI account as well. Copilot, which is Microsoft's kind of partnership with whoever it is, I personally don't find it particularly useful. It's good to ask nice little questions because it's there in your browser, you know, if you use Edge or something like that. But if you're going to do any code, I personally have found, and I know other people have said this, Claude is by far the best at Delphi. There are Olama, there's some tuned Olama offline versions there as well, but you need a reasonable machine to run it. And we're aware of some people who use it. I mean, there's a thing called Augment, and what that does, if you've ever come across that allows you to use multiple service providers from, you know, Anthropic and a few others. you can use augment, and it will do a lot of things. And I know one MVP, for example, in Germany, he uses augment code, and he now says that he uses AI almost exclusively for all of his work, and he believes it has given him a huge advantage. He doesn't trust it 100%. You know, he says you have to go back and tweak a few things, but I trust this guy. He's a good friend of mine and very reliable. And if he says he can do it, I believe him.
Yeah. I mean, to me, I don't really understand why there's this big religious divide about it. It's just another tool that we can use. Like when we all got Code Insight, I didn't feel that I had to take a stand and say, no, I'm going to manually type in my method signatures. I just used it, and AI and agentic AI is the same.
I have the advantage of starting my career in COBOL in the 80s.
Yeah.
And when we first started coding, we used to write out the code by hand with a pen. Actually, it was a pen. No, it was a pencil, I think, on COBOL coding sheets by hand. And someone else typed those programs in because the terminals were expensive and developers were expensive, but they're not as expensive with equipment. And I may have told this anecdote, I may have even been here I said it, but after about 4 months of that, and we used to wear lab coats, by the way, because we were scientists, computer scientists. That's how they viewed it. Ironic, but that, that's the 80s for you. They introduced dumb terminals, serial terminals. And so all of the young guys like me, I was like 18 or something like that, we could type. I'd been taught to type when I was a kid. My mother was a typist, so she taught me to type. Me and my colleagues, the young lads, we could all type our programs in, and all the guys who were steadfastly, they've been coding in COBOL for 20 odd years, all of a sudden we leapfrogged them. And the ones that just said, I'm not typing, that was it. They became obsolete. Many of them obviously went away and learned to type, but it's these kind of events happen throughout the history of technology. What makes our jobs exciting,
absolutely.
And if I can embrace it at my age, I'm sure nobody else would be say, I'm too old to learn. No, nonsense. I learn something every day. That's the great thing about my job, and I mean that.
That's the joy of it. Like I've said to you, when the day comes where I'm not interested in learning the new thing coming down the pipe, then that's time for me to go fishing.
Yeah, exactly. I think we were both talking about this earlier on. Yeah, I think we said gardening actually, but yeah, same difference. Yeah, I have a nice lake near me. I could go fishing. So yeah, that's it. People asking about REM objects. You'll have to ask them. I did some stuff with David Millington about that.
Yeah.
David Millington. Someone asked it in the chat. I can't remember if it's this one or someone else. Someone asked where David Millington was. He's still around. He's not dead or beamed up by aliens or kidnapped by anybody. He's gone off and done his own thing. He's a fairly young guy and decided he was going to go and explore things. He's working in the AI arena. So you've seen CodeBot. He also has a project that he's working, which he has announced now, which is to do. He's working with Nick Hodges on that. If those of you who are slightly older timers will remember Nick Hodges. And it's to do with trying to help make the internet a nicer place, shall we say, by encouraging people not to put comments on posts and things like that are scathingly horrible. I think it's a worthy cause. I don't know how they'll succeed because there are lots of people out there manipulating social media and things like that. But if they succeed, all power to them. I like David; he's a good guy, and Nick. I don't know as well as I know David, but he's still around.
At least they're doing something rather than just complaining about it like I'm doing. So
yeah, exactly. Same. I personally don't look at the news anymore because I just. I mean, it doesn't matter where you come from; it's just horrible, full stop. So I'm a pacifist as well. So anytime I see news of wars, it's horrible. So I always tell people our only religion is Delphi, our only politics are tabs and spaces, and that's it. And that's enough to start a fight in any place with a bunch of coders. So
or with or no with.
Solvent. That was the word I was looking for when I was talking about liquid. Yeah, very good. Yeah. See, the forumer, they're paying attention. That's good.
All right. Well, we've been going for 90 minutes now, so there's probably a few
It's always a
people.
pleasure.
Absolutely, we could go all day, but I do appreciate you're probably coming up towards your 18th hour doing this today, so I do appreciate you making yourself available. I've said this before, but every time I send out an email asking to do one of these APAC things at whatever ungodly hour it is for everybody that I'm sending the email to, the first person to reply every single time is Ian saying, absolutely, just tell me when.
Hey, I was a Delphi guy the very first day Delphi came out, and people always say, "Oh, you're so cheerful and positive. Look at what I do for a living.
Yeah.
I get to talk about something I did for donkey's years and love." So yeah, I appreciate it, and it's important. I mean, it's a little bit inconvenient for me, but I work from home, and I don't have to travel backwards and forwards. I used to work in London and have a 2-hour commute every day. So trust me, this is the easy life nowadays. I can go and get cakes if I want to. So
all right, well, go get a cake and
yeah,
enjoy the rest of what's left of your evening.
no worries, and I'll see you another time. Probably bump into you later in the year as well. We meet up every so often in the flesh as well. So
yeah.
All right, thanks everyone. Appreciate it. See you around in ADUG or something like that.
Thank you, Ian. Thank you, guys. Thank you, everyone, for joining. As I said, there will be a replay. We'll send out a link to everybody. So yes, and we'll see you at the next one. Cheers.
Cheers.